Welcome, friends. You found just Janilee at the corner of Am I Crazy? And No, I'm Not. Here's the science to prove it. But this week we have a special guest. It's Larissa! Oh, man.
Hi.
So, this is the Just Janilee episode. It's coming out after we talk about how we see ourselves in art form. And I was thinking, okay, so the Just Janilee episodes, they just are like a deeper dive into those topics. So, what I decided to do is take one of my favorite musicals. Yes, I'm a fan of musicals, big time. Don't even get me started on it. And my dog is too, because he hears me sing all the time, and I'm sure he loves it and isn't annoyed by it at all, as are my neighbors. It's great. Everyone loves musicals. But I wanted to have Larissa with us this week because she does not know the story of this musical. This is one of my favorite musicals. And I just want to have her here so that she can react and so that you can kind of see both how I really love the art form, but also how sharing my love of the art form can show up in Larissa. So, Larissa, are you
I'm excited
what?
to hear about this. I'm excited to
Yay.
hear about
Okay.
this.
So, this is the musical called Next to Normal. And Larissa, if I'm understanding correctly, you don't know hardly anything about it except for like a few things I've told you.
I know normal is a setting on a dryer.
Okay, so Larissa knows nothing. Uh Okay, so I'm just gonna go through like the plot of the musical, and I there's a bunch of things that I really like about it, but I'm going to try and stick mainly to the story for this episode. There's an entire separate conversation I can have about the music and how it like handles like the transition between major and minor chords and like all of how like the emotional implications of that. Like I can talk about that stuff for hours, but we're going to stick to the story this time so that Larissa can follow along. That's not a diss on Larissa. It's just I know a lot about music.
No, I'm excited to learn about this, and I'd love to learn about the music of it too, and how how musical chords change, the way people feel and sense. I love learning about that stuff, but I would get lost and
Maybe
confused
we'll have to do
otherwise.
a Patreon
So
thing
thank you.
with that aspect of it. That sounds fun. Okay.
That sounds
So,
awesome.
next to normal, I'm not going to explain the title until the song that's called maybe in parentheses next to normal. Um, this is one of those musicals where 90% of the play is just songs. So you go from song to song, and every once in a while you have a couple lines of dialogue in between the song. So, the first song is called Just Another Day. And you have a mom, and she's
Okay.
waiting up, and her teenage son, he's like 17. He comes home, and she's like, "What have you been doing?" And he's like, "Nothing." And she's like, "Yeah, right. I don't believe you." Um, and sorry, I have the notes on my phone here. So the mom starts singing the song. It's like 3:30 in the morning, and she's like, I was imagining what it might have been like if you had died, and like what if there's like a gang war, or if you'd gotten the bird flu. I mean, like I've been like what happened? Like, why are you home so late, right? Like these super normal mother emotions. And
Right.
so finally the mom's like, go to bed. And so then the dad comes in and is like, what's going on? And the mom's like, nothing, it's fine. And then we get introduced to like the daughter, right? And the daughter comes in, and mom's like, hey, how are you doing? And the daughter, I'm going to start throwing in some names here. So the mom's name is Diana, and the daughter's name is Natalie. So Natalie comes in and is like, hey, mom, what's up? Um, or the mom's like, hey, Natalie, how are you doing? And Natalie's like, I'm really stressed with school. I have a paper that's due, like this, that. Natalie is a piano player. So she has like a piano performance, and it's like, hey, mom, like, do you want to come? And mom's like, well, we'll see if we can put it on the calendar. And Natalie goes, Mom, the calendar's on April from last year. And so mom goes, oh, well, happy Easter. So, I mean, like, like, that kind of exchange kinda lets you know maybe something's a little off here, but also it's funny, right? So, we aren't, like, super depressed or anything. And then just to make it a perfect family situation, mom is like, Natalie, you shouldn't stress as much. For instance, I'm gonna go have sex with your dad." And Natalie goes, Thanks. I'm so glad I know. Like, that's a weird thing to tell your daughter, right? So, the song keeps
Right.
going, and then you have the son whose name is Gabe. So Gabe and Natalie, brother, sister, they're singing along, right? And it's like, like sometimes life's just hard. It's a feeling that doesn't really go away. Just like another day. They keep singing. Trying to see if there's anything else important in the song to kind of catch on to. Basically, they're all just like, "Hey, it's just another day," right? Um, so that's like the introduction. And then we switch to a song called Everything Else, which is just Natalie, and she's sitting there playing Mozart at the piano, right? And I love the first couple lines of the song. So I'm gonna read them to you. Okay. It goes, Mozart
Yeah.
was crazy, flat fucking crazy, batshit, I hear. But his music's not crazy, it's balanced, it's nimble, it's crystalline clear. And when I first heard those lines, me being who I am, I'm like, that's so true. She goes on in the song to be like, you don't hear his debt and disease and his craziness. Like it's just the music and everything else just goes away. And I just focus on the music, right? Which is how I feel when I play the piano often.
Right.
And so she starts to get really anxious. And then, the song kind of builds up and she's basically like, I'm just going to graduate early. I'm going to be gone. And there's nothing that my paranoid parents can say about it. I'm just going to get out of here. So, you know that something's up. Natalie's not feeling that
Yeah.
great, right? And so, this boy walks in named Henry.
Yeah.
And Henry's like, you play the piano cool. And Natalie's like, you're crazy. And everything. And I think what was the line? Henry's like, "You're kind of a confusing person." And Natalie goes, "You should meet my mother." And so we move on to a different situation. Um, it's a song that's called Who's Crazy slash My Psychopharmacologist and I. So this is where we learn that maybe the family's not entirely like this picturesque suburban family, but it goes through and you have this doctor who is Dr. Fine, and he's fine or she's fine. Get it? Dr. Fine. I'm really funny. What are you doing to my hand? No teefies. Don't hurt me. Sorry. So you have Dr. Fine, and he's coming in and he says a whole bunch of like, the pink ones are taken with food, but not the white ones. The white ones are taken with the round yellow ones, but not the triangle yellow ones. Triangle yellow ones are taken with the oblong green ones with food, but not with the pink ones. If a train is leaving New York at 120 miles an hour and another train is leaving St. Petersburg at the same time but going backwards, which train? Like, it's just like it builds on how absolutely crazy it can be when you have like these medications and you have to take them at just the right time. And like there's another point in the song when he's like, you get out your mortar and your pestle. Like you don't actually do that nowadays, but like, building on just how crazy it is to have all of these medications, right? So you have the
Oh, no, I mean, that is exactly how a nurse feels when trying to administer
Yeah,
meds.
right? So, this
Yeah.
song goes, feel free to speak up more, by the way. It's a lot more like a Just Janley episode, but, you seem very engaged, so I'm just gonna keep going. So the song keeps going forward, and the husband, his name is Dan. So Dan's out in the car, he's like, "Who's crazy? The one who can't cope or the one who waits in a car?" And it's kind of like this interesting kind of question, right? And
Mhm.
so you genuinely start thinking like, who's crazy, the husband or the wife, right? Who's crazy to live their
Yeah.
whole life believing that somehow things aren't as bizarre as they are, right? And so he talks about how he remembers what his wife was like, what Diana was like when they got married. She was 25 and she was young and alive, but now I think I would settle for someone who can drive. And it's such a poignant question that is so it's just swept away because it's the beginning of the song, and then we go into, like, how Diana views her relationship with her psychopharmacologist. But I think that's an interesting question just kinda throw at the beginning, like, who is the crazy one? The one who sticks around or the one who needs medication? Larissa's nodding her head.
Well, and I mean, that's a really yeah, sorry. I'm over here like, "Really? Okay, what happens next?" And I'm nodding my head as if people can hear the marbles in my head rattle. Um, you can't, sorry. There might not be marbles in there today, who knows? But I mean, that's a really good question is and I posed something very similar to a therapist. I was like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result. I'm doing the same thing third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time, hoping for a different result because I can't back down in this. So am I the problem? Am I the
Right.
crazy one here? And so it's a really good question to
And,
pose it that way.
our episode like, our podcast it's geared mostly towards people who have gone through stuff, but also trying to make it accessible to people who just have those that they care about who have gone through some hard things. And so you do start to think, like,
Yeah.
I often like, I have been crazy, by, like, weird definitions of crazy, right? But, like, I've definitely been in a very mentally unstable place before, but was I the crazy one, or was my friend who didn't give up on me and pulled me out of the situation, were they the crazy one? Like, both of those things defy logic, right?
Exactly.
Such fun
Yeah.
things to think about. Don't worry, it gets better. So, we keep going through the song, and Diana starts singing, like, "My psychopharmacologist and I," right? She's like, "It's an odd romance, it's intense and intimate, and, like, he'll never hold me, but he'll always take my calls," right? Because, that's what doctors do, and she goes on to, like, he knows my every secret, and I know his name. Just really kind of bringing to light, when you have and we've talked about therapy, and I feel like, well-trained therapists are aware of this, but there is this certain attachment you can have to your therapist because they're the first person that's, like, cared, to try and help you
Yeah.
and has any sort of amount of success. Um, so we keep going through the
Yeah.
song. And throughout the song, it's like a 7-week journey, and there's different rounds of medication. And so we have, like, okay, so the first round of medication is over. Like, how are you feeling? And she's like, I have less anxiety, but I have headaches and blurry vision, and I can't feel my toes. And the doctor's like, oh, it's okay. We'll try again, and we'll come back at this. And then we kind of have, like, these voices that are in her head, and they're really fun. And so they have, like, Zoloft and Paxil and Buspar and Xanax, and they start listing, like, all of these medications, and it's my favorite.
As the names of the
No, that's what
characters in
the
her head?
voices in her head say. So it's like
Oh.
Zoloft and Paxil and
Oh,
Buspar and
okay.
Xanax, Depocot, Klonopin, Ambien, Prozac, Ativan calls me when I see the bills. These are a few of my favorite pills. Um, kind of, bringing in some Sound of Music reference there. And so, it's just like, and then they
Right.
start going and, um, excuse me. And so during the song, we kind of get, like, we flash back over to kind of how Natalie is doing with, like, Henry. Remember, Henry's that guy who walked in on her while she was practicing. And Henry basically is saying, hey, like, you might like jazz. And she's like, are you kidding me? Jazz has no structure. Remember, like, Mozart, this very structured thing that she can cling to. And he's like, okay, so, but jazz is like, it could be like creation, like an act of creation. And she's like, you're like one of those pretentious stoner types, is the phrase that she uses, because he does smoke marijuana. And he's like, that's not fair. I'm not pretentious. I am definitely not classical though. That's too rigid and structured. And so you kind of have these two people where it's like you have Natalie who thrives on the structure and Henry who's just like go with the flow kind of thing, right? So they're trying to work out their relationship and then the song bounces back to, this doctor. And I like the comparison. That's something that happens a lot throughout this musical is kind of like this um dichotomy of the mother's experience and the daughter's experience, right? So you have the doctor in the mother situation who's, very structured and very like, here's your medication, and okay, so here are the side effects, and we'll try and change it. And you have Diana who's just like, we have this romance that's going on, right? And so you have like structure and chaos in the daughter, like in Natalie and Henry, but also in Diana and her doctor. Right? So I love
Right.
the contrast there. It's really fun. So then we get to like, another state in, the um what am I trying to say? Like another couple weeks have passed, right? And so the doctor's like, how are your side effects? She's like, well, I can't feel my fingers or toes. I sweat profusely and I've gained 6 pounds, which is, really not fair. And the doctor's like, okay, well, we'll adjust it again. And it keeps kind of bouncing back between these two. And then, as if you've almost forgotten, Dan, the father of the family out in the car is like, who's crazy? Posing this question again, like the one who's half gone, or maybe is it the one who holds on, the one who sees doctors, or the one who just sits in the car? So thinking about like who's the crazy one in this, and at the same time you have like the structure and the chaos with the mother and the daughter in their separate situations. Like, I don't know, like it's just this is like it's a fun show with the story plot like on the surface level, but when you kind of dive deeper, it just gets more complex and it's just a lot more fascinating.
I love the idea of, who's more messed up, for lack of a better term. The one needing the meds or the one enabling the
Yeah.
situation is almost the question, it sounds like. So is it the codependent person that's holding on and sitting in the car waiting for, I'm assuming it's an hour-long psychotherapy appointment, or the one who is sitting in the psychotherapy appointment multiple times, changing medicine over and over
Yeah.
and over and over again? And it's just very interesting. Yeah. Because I mean, it's a completely, that's why they have Al Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous, or very similar things for different
Yeah, or Narcotics
types of,
Anonymous, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I love it, and it keeps going. There's, like, another one where, like, the voices in her head are now saying, like, "Here are all of the side effects, like headache and nausea and cramping and diarrhea and, like, all of these things," and then they just kinda, like, stop really suddenly, and the doctor says, "Oh, one more thing, use may be fatal." And it's just like the husband says use may be fatal. And so it's just kind of like, a couple people are like, use may be fatal, just kind of like reminding you, yeah, we're messing with medications, we're messing with a person's head, right? So you have another situation, she comes back and she's like,
Yeah.
well, like I have absolutely no sexual desire, like, but whether that's the marriage or the medication is anyone's guess. And the doctor goes, oh, I'm sure it's the medication. And Diana goes, oh, that's so sweet. But my husband's waiting in the car. And you just kinda, like, stop because, like,
Which,
it's funny, but then if you think about it for 2 seconds, you're like, "That doesn't make sense." If the doctor had said it was the marriage, that would have made sense for her to say that, right? And so you start to get the sense that, like we
yeah.
had earlier in the last song, that something's just a little bit off, right? Um, anyway, so then we have same thing, the song kind of ends with this, though. Um, and this is the part that is it, like, is a sucker punch the first time you hear it, because like, you're listening to the song, you have the chaos, you have the structure, you have the who's crazy, everything, and then at the very end of the song, it's like, Goodman Diana, like, here's the patient and everything, and so it's like 7 weeks, and Diana goes, "I don't feel like myself. I mean, I don't feel anything." And the doctor goes, patient stable. And then the song ends on this minor chord that sounds really cool. But I mean, this is a musical that came out, in the early 2000s. And that is very much how mental health was viewed, right? It's like you don't feel anything.
Mhm.
You're completely numb. Perfect. You're stable. As if being stable was this pinnacle of what you want to, like, what you should strive to be in life, you know?
Yeah. The emotionless
Yeah.
automaton that they're trying to numb you
Hmm.
into so that you just move through life without needing
Yeah.
the pain instead of fixing the pain.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry. Very excited. So,
Okay.
and then we have this miniature little scene. So Natalie and Henry have kept hanging out, obviously, and so he offers her like to have some of his marijuana, and whereas like she has this line that's like, "Oh, I don't put anything into my mouth that's on fire," and Henry goes, "That's a good rule," and so she's like, you are just like you're crazy and you're loose and everything and you have no structure, but I need this structure, and anything that's going to stop me from the structure is no, it's not going to happen. And so he doesn't pressure her, he just offers, she says no, and he's like okay. And then he's like, they have this song together called Perfect for You, where Henry's like, hey, I like you. And she's like, you shouldn't. Like, no, like she has a line like right before the song that's like, I'm one fuck up away from disaster, and it's so interesting for her to like, she obviously enjoys spending time with him, right? Because she's been doing it for 7 weeks.
Right.
And there's something about his, less structured approach to life that she's craving, but she's not willing to have a relationship with him, right? Because
Yeah. For
yeah, I mean,
fear.
like, giving up, that loss of control, like, no, that's terrifying, right?
Yeah.
And so he's basically Henry has this, like, "I could be perfect for you." He's like, "I might be lazy, a loner, a bit of a stoner, it's true, but I could be perfect for you," right? Um, and so she basically is just like, "No, not gonna work." And the whole song, it's really fun. They just go back and forth, but the song ends with them kissing, and finally they're like, okay, so they're dating, right? And then when they kiss at the end of the song, like,
Right.
you realize that they're on Natalie's front porch. And her dad opens the door and is like, Henry, it's so nice to finally meet you. And so oh, I'm sorry, back up just a little bit. So, they're on the front porch, and you have Gabe, the son, and Diana, the mom. And Gabe's like, "Are you spying on your own daughter?" And Diana's like, "When did she get a boyfriend? Like, how did I miss this happening?" Right? And Gabe is like, "Well,
Right.
you miss a lot of things. Like when you're super numb, you don't really get to participate in life, right?" Um,
Yeah. Well, it's like the
yeah.
calendars
Oh,
that
and I
way.
forgot to mention earlier,
Yeah.
when she's doing like the Mozart is Crazy song, right? She's hoping, and throughout the next song as well, she's hoping that her parents will show up, and they end up not showing up. Actually, I think that's in a future song. Forget I said that. Sorry. But the point is that basically her parents are so focused on getting Diana to the doctor, taking care of the mom, that this daughter's just kind of going by the wayside, right? Um,
Yeah.
so
The
yeah.
forgotten kid. Yeah.
So when Diana is like watching her daughter out on the porch, she actually has kind of like a little flashback to when she was younger and when her husband, Dan, is like, marry me, like, let's get married. And so you can tell that Diana is seeing her in her daughter, at least in terms of the relationship that they're having with, Henry or with Dan, right? So then Diana, after kind of like having this, moment where she's seeing her daughter and she remembers herself, she has this really hauntingly beautiful song, and it's called I Miss the Mountains. And basically, she sings like a couple stanzas, and she's slowly, as she sings, I'm just gonna read a couple lines here and there. It's such a good song. But she goes like, "There was a time when I flew higher, when I would be running free, when I felt like my soul was on fire. But now I have all of these blank and tranquil years, and they've dried up like my tears. So it's just like I don't even cry anymore.
Yeah.
But I miss the mountains. I miss the heights. I miss, the I love these two lines here. All the manic, magic days and the dark, depressing nights. Because the first thing, like what started this, right?
Ooh.
Remembering her own
Right.
romance and her own proposal. But all of a sudden, she's not just missing the good times, she's missing the dark, depressing nights too. She's missing both, right? So then she like goes to the medicine cabinet and starts to take out, a whole bunch of her pill bottles and keeps singing, I miss the mountains. I miss the highs, the lows, the climbing, the falling. Excuse me. I miss like the snow and the rain, like just experiencing life, right? She opened
She just wants to experience anything,
exactly.
any
Yeah.
emotion. Yeah. She wants to not be
Yeah,
numb.
you get it.
Okay.
You get it. So so she starts like opening the pill bottles and keeps singing and it's like, mountains they can make you crazy and here it's just, safe and sound and steady and consistent, right? And then she's like, "Well, everything is balanced here. Everything is like on an even level. Like, I think the word is keel. Everything here is perfect." And then there's like this pause in the song. She goes, "But nothing's real. Nothing's real. Like,
Yeah.
it's perfect. It's structured. It's
Yeah.
this, like, it's balanced. It's like, oh, you're numb. Like, you don't feel anything. Patient stable. Like, it's steady, but it's not real." And so she starts pouring her medication down the toilet. And she's like, I miss the mountains. I miss like the lonely climb. I miss wandering, just wandering through the wilderness, spent not like you just have all of this time and you're just experiencing everything, and she ends it with, I miss the mountains. I miss my life. And so, like, you have this entire song where she's just like, I miss the happy times, but I also miss the bad times. And, I miss the highs and the lows and everything there is crazy, everything here is perfect, but nothing here is real. And it's just like this arc of emotion throughout the entire song. And she ends with like, I miss my life, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so she has all of the pills in the toilet, and we see Gabe walk in, and he's like, "Are you sure about this, Mom?" And she's like, "Do you think it's a bad idea?" And he's like, "I think it's a great idea. I think what you're doing is really brave." And she's like, "Well, what's your dad gonna think?" And he's like, "Nothing if he doesn't know, right?" And so, right, but like we have this situation where obviously, why would she not want to tell her husband that she's flushing her medication?
Yeah.
Because she's afraid of how her husband will react, right? That he's going to try and fix her again. He's
Yeah.
going to try and get her back to this stable place. So, anyway, she flushes the toilet, the meds go down, and then this is what I was talking about before. You have Dan. He basically is just like happy, like, oh, his wife is like stable and everything. And so he's like, for the first time in a while, he's like, everything's gonna be good. Excuse me. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Little
like it
does he
literally the
know.
song is called It's Gonna Be Good. And so it's like everything's gonna be good. Good, good. It's gonna be good. Um, and so then he's like, it's been 2 weeks and everything's working just the way that it, is supposed to. Sorry, my notes closed for a second. Okay, they're back. And
Yeah, they finally found that happy space that they're trying to find with medications. They finally
I would
found
say
that
stable place.
that perfect
Yeah.
spot, sweet
He
spot.
found the
Yeah.
sweet spot where, things are finally fitting. They're finally this like suburban family that's like perfect, right? It's been 2 weeks, the meds are working the way they should, everything's stable. Like this is good news, right? And so then you have, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm getting the order right here. Okay.
Okay.
And so then Diana comes in, right? And you can start to see, like we did earlier, that something's just a little off because she goes, "Hello? Oh, everything's great here. Like, I disinfected the entire house. I rewired the computer. I did some decoupage. I think I'm going to go retile the roof next." Like, something's a little off.
The total
Right?
manic
Like her
state.
manic state
Yeah.
of cleaning everything and retiling the roof, which probably isn't wise, right? And so then Dan starts singing again, like it's gonna be
Right.
good, it's gonna be good, kind of a little differently than before because he's now trying to convince himself, right? And so he goes like, "Well, the sex is still amazing and we
Right.
don't stay up that late. You know, she's happy as a clam. You know, like I look great, like everything's fine, right?" So he's just like trying to convince himself, but slightly different. And then this is one of my favorite parts.
Yeah.
It makes me laugh every time I hear it. But Natalie and Henry are on the porch again, and Dan opens the door. He's like, "Henry, we've been waiting for you. Like, I've heard so much about you. Come in and have dinner with us." And Natalie goes, You can't." Like, and so Dan starts singing like it's gonna be good, and Natalie's like, Dad, Henry's gotta go. He has homework, surgery, rabies." It's just
Anything.
because
Just
I mean,
get
like,
him
it's
out of the
perfect. Like,
house. Right.
no teenage girl wants their parents to meet their boyfriend, right? Like, it's just like this such a normal thing, and it's like, yeah, like my boyfriend has a dog's disease because, golly, I just don't want my dad to meet him, right? So they come in, they start sitting down to eat
Yeah.
dinner and everything. Everyone's there. You have Dan, Diana, Natalie, Gabe, Henry, everyone. And all of a sudden, at the end of the song, um, Diana walks in and she's holding a birthday cake. And Diana's like, "All right, like it's someone's birthday." And Henry's like, "Whose birthday is it?" And Natalie's like all of a sudden stone faced and she goes, "It's my brother's." And Henry goes, "I didn't know you had a brother." And she goes, "I don't. He died before I was born." And yeah, exactly.
Okay. Sorry. Larissa takes a deep gasp that nobody else can see or hear
Right? Because like you've been seeing
and has
right,
this
you've
look
been
on her
seeing
face.
Gabe this entire time. And now because we know that he's
Yeah.
actually not alive, if you go back to the beginning and you watch the playthrough, he doesn't interact with anyone except Diana. She
Mhm.
raised him
Okay.
in her mind. From the He died when he
Yeah.
was a
Okay.
baby, right? Because Natalie's like 16 and, Gabe died before she was born. She's raised Gabe in her mind and now he's a teenager. And so for 17 years or 16
Oh.
years, she's just raised the son in her mind. And there's this really beautiful but sad song that Dan sings where he's like, "Honey, like he's not here. He's been dead for 16 years. Like I know that you know this. Like do you really like do you think he's here?
Yeah.
Like what's going on?" Right? And so it's
Right.
also interesting because if you go back to when she's flushing her medications, she's having a conversation with herself, right? With with Gabe.
Yeah. With her figment of
Yeah,
what
and
this
this
child
child
is.
supports her, right? And this child is like, "Yeah, whatever you want to do." And so, for me when I first heard this, I started to get like a little bit of a bad vibe, but like I don't think I like Gabe as a character because he helped her flush her medication. But at the same
Yeah.
time, she wanted to feel things, so it's okay, I guess.
I've had conversations with people when they've stopped their meds and they'll call me up and it's, "Oh, I stopped my meds 3 weeks ago." And I'm all, "How's that doing for you?" Because what
I mean,
else do
yeah,
you
I've
say
I've stopped my
other
meds and
than,
put people in really weird situations where they're just like, "I don't know how to respond to this." Because I can tell that you're being manic again
yeah,
and everything, right? And so it's just like yeah, I don't know. At this point, I'm not sure how I feel about Gabe, right? So,
yeah, yeah. I'm thinking, Gabe's might not be the most helpful
Right?
person, but
But, like,
okay.
okay, so, they have this whole song, right? And Dan, he's like after he's done singing, he's like, "What happened to your meds?" And she's like, we have the happiest septic tank on the block." Um,
I like
right?
that
And he's
answer.
like,
Sorry, that's just like brilliant.
sassy, I love it, yeah, and he's like, "What? Come on, why? Like, they were working." And she's like, "No, they weren't really." And he's like, "Okay, we'll
Mhm.
just get a new round, we'll call Doctor Fine again." And she's like, "No." And he's like, come on, like, I know that this is really hard." And she's like, "You know? Really?" And so then there's a song called "You Don't Know," where she basically is describing, and
Mhm.
this is a song that felt really true to me, someone who's had, like, depression for a while, but she's like, "Do you know what it's like to wake up in the morning and need help to lift your head up? Do you read obituaries and get jealous of dead people? Do you know what it's like to feel like you're dying alive? Do you know what it feels like to be standing on the edge of a
Yeah.
cliff not knowing when you're gonna fall or when you're gonna jump off? Like, do you really know what this feels like? Because 'Cause you're sitting here like, "Oh, yeah, I know, it's, like, really hard,"
Yeah.
you know? Do you have a world that once had color, but now it's just, like, black and white, like, it's grayscale? Like, do you know what that's like? You know, when you have tomorrow and you don't wanna go to tomorrow because it terrifies you, but you know that if you look backwards, you're gonna die because it's gonna drive you crazy. Like, you don't know. You don't actually know what this is like, right?
Yeah, and somebody who hasn't experienced that depression is never going to be able to fully know what another person who's had that
Yeah.
suicidality
Well, and,
has gone through.
you start to kind of
I
feel a
mean,
little bit for Dan here because he's really trying to help. Like, he liked that she was stable because he viewed it as progress. It's not like she said, "Hey, honey, let's sit down. I'm not feeling happy or sad and I miss the mountains." No, she had that conversation with Gabe. And so he's doing what he thinks is
yeah,
best, and so he's kind of in this really hard situation. She's like, um, "You don't know what it's like to feel like you're falling, you're never gonna hit the ground, that you feel like you're screaming, but no sound ever comes out, and life just keeps coming at you day by day by day by day, like, you don't know what it's like to live in that way." Right?
yeah, in that
And
gray,
so then we have
exactly.
Dan respond with his own song that's like, "I am the one." And so he's like, "Okay, tell me what you're afraid of. Tell me, what is bothering you." And he's trying to help, but you can also kind of tell from, the music of the song, but also like the tone of his voice that he's starting to get a little angry. He's starting to get a little upset with how long this has taken, right? I mean, like, it's 17 years of this. I'd be tired of it too, right? And so he's like, "Okay,
Yeah,
tell me what you're afraid of, and also can you tell me why I'm afraid that it's me? Like, why am I worried that what you actually are scared of is me? Like, I'm trying so hard to be the good person here, and you're not. Like, and I'm somehow the bad guy in your life, right? Like, he's the villain to her, right? Because she was scared to tell him that she flushed her meds or she didn't want to. So he's like, "Why have I been holding on for so long?" He's like, "We've been fine for so long now. How could something go wrong that I can't see? Like, I thought we were connected, right? Like, what's happening?"
yeah,
It reminds me though of his song when he's like, "Everything is good." When she comes in and is like, "I'm gonna retile the roof," and he's like, "Nope, everything's fine." Maybe that's part of the reason why.
yeah, where he's just sticking his
Exactly.
head in the
Where he's
sand.
just like,
Yeah,
no, no, everything's fine." He dismisses warning signs because he doesn't want to experience them again. And I mean, can we really fault him for that?
yeah. No, I mean he's protecting his
Yeah.
own mentality, if
It
that makes
does.
any
It's like that's
sense.
exactly what he's
And
doing.
he's protecting his own
Well, and I
reality.
love it.
I
I
mean,
love
and
all of
people do
this
it.
too because, if you're really paying attention to the plot and everything, you can't get mad at one person. Like, I mean, except maybe Gabe,
No.
at this point for me in the play, right? But I'm just like, I mean, it makes sense, right? Both of their perspectives are making sense here. And so then he, kind of keeps singing, and he's like, I'm the one who knows you. I'm the one who cares about you. I'm the one that's always been here. I'm the one who's always helped you. And if you think that I don't give a damn, then you don't know who I am. Right. So he's like, I have been here for so
Yeah.
long. And then we have this really fun situation here that doesn't really fully make sense till the end of the play. Spoilers. But all of a sudden, Gabe shows up and he starts singing with the dad. So they're both singing at the same time, right? So, Dan is singing like, "How
Okay.
could you leave me?" And Dan is singing to Diana, to his wife, like, "How could you leave me? Will you watch as I drown and just wonder why it didn't, like, why it happened? Are you bleeding? Are you bruised? Are you broken?" And at the same time, we have Gabe who's singing, "Hi, Dad, it's me. Why can't you see? I wonder why. Like, are you waiting? Are you wishing? Are you wanting for her to give you something that she can't give? Are you hurting? Are you healing? Are you like
Yeah.
hoping for an actual life to live?" Right. And so they have like, it's just really fun, like kind of how they sing and bounce off of each other here. And so then we have like the end of the song when all of them sing together. So we have Diana singing, "You don't know what it's like." We have Dan singing like, "I have been here the whole," well, Dan and Gabe are singing the same lines. And it's interesting. And I like that these lyrics apply because I'm the one who knows you, I'm the one who cares, I'm the one who's always been here. Dan is singing that to Diana. But doesn't it also apply to Gabe? Gabe's always been there,
It
right?
does.
Like we know that he's been raised in Diana's head, right? And so it's fun that like they're singing the same lines and Diana's just like it's a beautiful piece of work. It's such a good song, like musically, the way the melodies
Yeah.
fit together, it's awesome. So, anyway, then we have so this all happened, excuse me. So when Diana walked in with the birthday cake, Natalie and Henry went up to Natalie's room, right? And so Natalie's just getting really frustrated. She's like, when she gets like this, like she's useless. She can't use the phone. She can't drive. She's everything like this. And Henry, he's like, I bet she has some really dope pills though. And Natalie's like, well, apparently they don't work. Like,
Yeah. Apparently they're in the septic system. So,
um, anyway, so Henry's like, "Well, I'm old school. I'm like, all the preppies and the jocks are like raiding their parents' medicine cabinets, but I'm old school because I just like the pot. Like I'm just here for the marijuana." And she's like, "Yeah, you're the MacGyver of pot." Um, and so he's like, offers her pot again, and is like, "Do you want to take a hit?" And she's like, "Do you promise that this will help?" And he's like, "No." Like, of course it's not gonna work. Like, I can't promise that this is
let me
gonna
be
work, right?
completely
And I
honest.
love both
Yeah.
that he never pressures her to take it. I personally like that he has his line because he knows how to manage his life with marijuana. Like, it's helpful. It's something that helps him. At the time, it was
Yeah.
illegal everywhere in the country, so like we know that he's willing to like break a few rules, but at the same time, he has his own personal lines that he draws. He's like, "I don't raid people's medicine cabinets, even though I'm sure your mom has some dope stuff. Um, I stick with what I know and what benefits my life and something that I maintain control over." Right? So even though we had this
Yeah.
contrast at the beginning of Natalie and her structure versus Henry and his chaos, like Henry has his own rules as well. They're just not as strict and as tight as Natalie's, right?
Well, I think it's interesting because you can let the pot control you, just like pills, if you're not careful. And I think people delude themselves sometimes thinking that that's not the case when it
Yeah.
is. But
No,
sorry,
and it's
tangent.
true
Let's
too
keep going.
because
I'm
you
really,
also have Henry here though when Natalie's like, "Are you sure this will help?" And he says no. Like I feel like he's showing this
yeah.
level of self-awareness that we don't really, that we haven't really seen from any other character in this play. Like none of the Goodmans, the
Yeah.
family, the mom, dad, son, daughter, like none of them are showing this level of self-awareness of, I don't know if pot's gonna help you, but I mean, it helps me. You can try it if you want. Like, yeah. Anyway, Natalie
Yeah.
looks away and she has this song called Superboy and the Invisible Girl. And it basically is like, Superboy is everything. He's a hero, he's a lover, he's a prince, he's, everything that a kid ought to be, but he's not here. I'm here. And
Yeah.
she's just so frustrated, like
Oh,
she's
yeah.
like, I wish that I could just fly and disappear, and fly like really far away from here. And so then Diana actually opens up the door and Henry hides the pot. Um Diana doesn't notice though.
Yeah.
Um, and so then Natalie starts singing this song to, excuse me, to her mother, and she's like, Superboy and the Invisible Girl. He's the one that you wish would appear. He's your hero. He's forever your son, but he's not here. I am here, right? Like this really
Oh,
deep
yeah.
word, and so
Sorry.
it's okay. You can cry. It's a really good play.
No, I just it resonates so much with me. I've actually wanted so badly to say to certain individuals, stop grieving the kid that died and be there for the one
I
that
don't know if
lived.
Diana's necessarily grieving though. I feel like
No, she's not. And neither are the people that
Wednesday.
I want to say that to, quite honestly. So it resonates so much with
Yeah.
me, that concept of being that forgotten invisible child. Like I've written
Yeah.
essays. So I
Well, and
yeah.
and I find it interesting here because Diana has a little part of the song. Let me stand up here, where she goes like, that's not true. Yeah, like you're our little pride and joy. You're our perfect plan. You actually find out later that
Yeah.
Gabe was a surprise pregnancy, but Natalie was not. And so that's what she's referring to here. She's like, you were our perfect plan. We actually planned to have you, right? That I love you. I love you as much as I can. And then there's just like this pause in the music where, okay, we were like all against Diana because Natalie is so, she's making such a strong point, but then we also realize that, well, Diana is loving her as much as she can with her circumstances. So dang it, who's the villain again? Like there is no
Right?
right side. There is no villain in this story, right? Like they both have
Yeah.
sides, they both
Yeah.
have points of view that make sense. There's like silence, so Diana leaves, and so the Natalie starts looking in a mirror and singing again, like, take a look at the invisible girl, like here she is clear as the day, but you have to look closely, and quickly because she's gonna fade away. And so then Gabe shows up and he starts singing with her. Natalie doesn't like acknowledge his presence there, but I like that he does show up and sing in the song because his death is, it's huge, right? Like it's had this massive impact. And so they both
Yeah.
start singing, like Superboy and the Invisible Girl, he's not there. He is not there. And that's like the end of the song where it's like he's not, like she like he's gone, but like she's not there. So like you have at the beginning of the song where it's like he's not here. And so then at the end of the song it's he's not here. So it's like, hey, mom, realize that, I'm here. I'm alive. But then at the end of the song it's like, you know what? I'm not here because I'm the one that's actually alive,
Yeah.
but the only one that you care about is my dead brother, right? Such a beautiful song. I love the journey that
Yep.
song takes. So
Yeah.
then she sits down again next to Henry, just kind of like she's not here, she's not here. And Henry offers her the pipe again, and she just finally is like, okay, and she just takes it, right? And I mean, like, can we really
Yeah.
blame her? I would.
No.
Like if you're just feeling like you're completely like not there, like it doesn't matter. You know what? You seem, Henry, you seem really loose. It doesn't seem like this pot is controlling your life. And you seem a lot happier than I've ever been. And yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Maybe this can help me too. Like I'll try anything to stop
Yeah.
feeling invisible. Yeah.
So, and with
Yeah.
the scenes shifts. So now we're back with the doctor, right? Well, not with the doctor. We have Dan and Diana. And they're like, we'll find a new doctor since you didn't like Dr. Fine, right? And so Dan mentions like there's someone out there for you in the depression chat rooms. they'll say it's like dating. You have to keep going until you find the right match, which, something that Larissa and I talked about in episode 7 with therapy. Like, yeah, it is like that. You have to keep going till you find the right doctor that matches for you. But Diana's like, they have depression chat rooms.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, this doctor is supposed to be fantastic. He's a real rock star. Um, 3 different women at work gave me his name. And Diana's like, 3 different people at your job think that I'm nuts? You know, and so we kind of have this
Right.
situation where
Wait a minute.
Dan's
What?
not answering her questions, which I find really interesting as well, because if he's not being vulnerable with her, she's not vulnerable with him.
How's she supposed to be
Exactly.
vulnerable with
But
him?
we know that there's good intentions on both sides, but she knows that he's going to people at his work. He's going to these depression chat rooms to talk about her, and he's not talking to her. And so you kinda see this
Yeah.
disconnect where they're not really working together very well, but they both have good intentions, but, it's just it's
Yeah.
frustrating because it's not like, if you're watching a horror film, don't open the door. Like, that's what you do, to not be murdered. Don't go down to the
Yeah.
basement. It's easy, it's simple. But in this place, it's like, I wanna fix it, like, I wanna be able to fix this world, but I can't. There's no solution here. Right? I
Yeah.
love this play.
The solution is not going to,
I love how
yeah.
complex it is, but
The solution doesn't actually
I
fix
also
anything.
real
Yeah.
there's a YouTuber that reacts to things, and he always goes like, "Hey, when there's a murder, everything is so much more interesting." It's just like it has my attention more, and it's more like real life, and it's like a running joke, and it's funny, but it is true that when you have like situations that are really true to form, like if I were to stop telling you this and it were to just end this episode right now, I mean, how many people listening? And Larissa, would you go look up to find out how it ends?
Oh
Because
yeah.
it's
Oh yeah.
engaging, it draws you in. It's so relatable because it reflecting that real life. I just have to know how it ends, right?
Yeah. There's there's a quote that I keep remembering as we're talking about this, and it's from Anna Karenina. I don't remember who wrote it, but it's some famous thing. And it goes, "All happy families are alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." And I mean, each family has dysfunction, and there's really no happy families out there. Every family has its dysfunction in some
Right?
way, shape, or form. But there's grades of it. Not no two families are going to have the same type, function, all of it of
Yeah.
dysfunction,
Well, and
if
even
that
like
makes
when it
sense.
comes to, related families, I have talked to some people about
Yeah.
like there's similarities between their mom and my mom, but there's a difference where my mom crosses the line and goes too far. It doesn't mean that everything that she does is wrong, but at some point it becomes too much. And finding that line is hard. And often it can be subjective based on,
Yeah.
personal views of the world and beliefs and belief systems, right? Like there's
Yeah.
no it's
Exactly.
just it's beautiful and a complex and wonderful thing to talk about. I like it. Anyway, back to the show. So Diana sees another doctor. This doctor is called Dr. Madden. And so throughout their entire meeting, because Dan earlier was like, yeah, this guy's like he's supposed to be fantastic, a real rock star. And so once she is like in his office, there's like a chord of music and he turns into a rock star. Like, with the guitar and the hair and everything. And so she spins around and is like, "What?" And he's like, I just said welcome." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And this keeps happening throughout like their conversations where it's like, she sits down, he's a rock star and she jumps. So like she's scared of this reputation, right? And I think there's also probably a little
Yeah.
PTSD going on here of she doesn't wanna be numb again, right? And so, I mean, he's a rock star, he's fantastic, but that's terrifying because maybe I won't have the strength to advocate for myself against him.
I think part of it also is that she's afraid to have to let go of
Yeah,
Gabe.
we'll see.
I mean, if you think about it that way, she lets this person who's been that solid rock in her life, let if she lets that person go and that person's not there anymore, what does she have left?
Okay, well, you're just a little too insightful. No, I'm kidding.
Sorry.
I'm kidding. It's perfect. It's perfect. So, it's the whole, "Hi, nice to meet you. Tell me about yourself." And Diana's like, he's like, "Well, tell me about yourself." Like, it keeps happening. He's like, "Let's get it on now, baby." And Diana's like, "What?" And he's like, "I said, let's get started. Are you nervous?" Like, he doesn't understand what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, you disappeared for a second. Are you back?
I'm back.
Yep.
Are you there?
Sweet.
Okay, good.
Basically she starts telling her history, right? And she's like, "Well, I was diagnosed with bipolar 16 years ago, I guess, but apparently bipolar didn't cover all of it." And doctor's like, "Well, sometimes what we do is just put names on like a collection of symptoms. It's like the best we can do. Maybe bipolar, sometimes you actually have schizophrenia or like depression." And Diana is like a little hurt. She's like, I don't have depression. Like, my mom told me when I was a kid that I was really high spirited. And trust me, my mom would know because she was in the PTA and got banned from the PTA for being too, high spirited. So I don't have depression. Like, it's this like resistance. Like, I do not accept that label. That label is not coming on me, right?
Yeah.
And so, Dr. Madden's trying to
Right.
like be gentle and kind, and is like, "Well, sometimes there's like a predisposition to illness from like family, so like maybe we can talk about your family and everything, right?" And he's like, "Well, sometimes you need like a triggering event for these mental illnesses to kind of come out." And she's like, "You know what? I just never know what to say when I go over this. It's like every time I tell my story, it feels like I'm talking about a completely different person." And that to me is just like, it's a massive level of dissociation. It's like, I'm not even connected with my life.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, I don't even care anymore. Like, it's just someone else's story. It's just a list of facts. Like, she ended the last um with the last doctor, she was so numb and disconnected from everything that this time it's just like, so the doctor kind of responds with like, "Okay, well, tell me the last time that you were truly happy." And Diana just kind of freezes and she's like, silent. And Dr. Madden's like, was it when you got married?" Like, trying to help her come up with an
Can
idea.
you answer this
Yeah.
better?
And
Yeah.
she's like, "Well, I thought I was happy then." And so Dr. Madden's like, "There's a difference?" She's like, "Yeah, there's a difference." And I love this. "Most people who think that they're happy just haven't thought about it enough. Most people who think they're happy are actually just stupid." And it's just like, it's really harsh,
Ooh.
but it's kind
Mic
of a
drop.
mic drop moment where it's just like, some people, and I think in this instance, she's talking specifically about Dan, because Dan thinks he's so happy. He has his whole "it's gonna be good" song, right? And she's like, he's just not thinking about his life enough. He's just avoiding it. He's just too out
No.
of touch with everything, right? So,
He's been able to dissociate enough to not
yeah.
deal with the grief of the
Well, and I
son. Whereas instead of grieving at all, she's just pretended this kid
Right, and
has
they're
lived.
both dissociated, but in different ways. She's dissociated to be numb and has
Mhm.
refused to let go, whereas Dan has refused to acknowledge that he lost a child and has dissociated into pretending everything's perfect. They're both ways you can dissociate,
Yeah.
right? And so at this
Yeah.
point, though, I think it's interesting that you're bringing this up, because then I would start asking the question, well, why isn't Dan in therapy? Why isn't Dan addressing these issues? Why is it that in this context, Diana is the one who has the issues, but Dan is the normal one who's just waiting in the
Yeah.
car and just is the one who has a crazy wife? He's the normal one. She's just the one who's crazy. And it's the only difference is
because
sorry,
yeah,
didn't mean to cut you off.
yeah. No, no. I think you're gonna answer it, but I'm thinking because he's not acknowledging
I
the
think it's just
crazy that
because
he
his
has.
type of dissociation is a little more socially acceptable. Pretending everything's fine is
Yeah.
way more socially acceptable than having hallucinations of a child who died 16 years ago, right? Like if you look at those two surface value, one of them seems crazy and one of them doesn't. But when you understand how mental
When neither of them are
exactly, when
really
you understand
healthy.
mental illness,
Yeah.
they're kind of the same. They're dealing with the same situation in two completely different ways.
And it's so funny because the same person that I want to yell at, stop grieving the child that died and be there for the one that lived, that person has told me, I will not cry. I will not tell anybody about this child. You do not have the right to mention this child because I don't want to have to live it.
Taking over control of the narrative.
And I'm sitting there going,
You can't bring up this
and
child
I'm sitting there
because
going,
I
I
don't
don't want
want
to lie.
to
Yeah.
be aware of this child's existence. And so, that probably is happening here where Dan's like, would you just stop imagining that our son is alive? Because I hate that I have to keep being reminded that I have a son who died. It's so good.
Exactly.
Okay. So,
Which unfortunately, that poor little girl, that second child, is also a constant reminder of the
yeah,
child that died. And they don't even realize
exactly.
it.
So it actually, it's so fun. So there's Dr. Madden, right? He's an insightful therapist. Um, and he goes, "Well, were you happy when your son was born?" And she just is, "My son?" And then a Gabe appears in the background and he's watching, right? Because we're talking about him again. And Dr. Madden is like, "Well, tell me about him."
Yeah.
She's like, "About my son." And he's like, "Yeah, like, why is he still around? Like, why is he still in your, like, this is a really good way to kind of approach the fact that you're having hallucinations of someone who died 16 years ago is to be like, okay, well, tell me about him. Like, where are they coming from? So Gabe starts singing his song.
Yeah.
The original Broadway cast, it's Aaron Tveit, and I know that probably means nothing to you, but he's just a really good singer. Oh, he's really good.
Okay.
So he starts singing, and his song is called "I'm Alive." And it's so interesting because literally we've just proven up to this point that he's actually not alive, right? So why is he singing a song about being alive? And I love the words of this song.
Because he is in
Yeah,
her mind,
the words are just amazing.
right?
So
Okay.
he goes,
So I'm
you
on the
were
right
totally
track.
on the right
Sorry.
track. He goes, "I am what you want me to be, and I'm your worst fear. You'll find it in me. Come closer, come closer." And so then we have Dr. Madden's questions kind of in the middle of the song. He's like, where do you think your son comes from, right? And so then Gabe starts singing again. He's like, "I am more than memory. I am what might be. I am mystery. You know me." Right? So show me. Gabe starts walking in a circle around him. He's like, "When I appear, it's not so clear if I'm a simple spirit or I'm flesh and blood." Right? But I'm alive. I'm so alive. I feed
Mhm.
on the fear that's behind your eyes. I need you to need me, so it's no surprise that I'm alive. So alive. I'm alive. And I feel like for me at this
Okay.
point, I start to really not like Gabe. I start casting him as like this villain. Like, I feed on the fear behind your eyes. I need you to need me, right? Like, if you don't need me around, then I stop existing. Like there's a lot of stories, a lot of like movie plots where it's like Jekyll and Hyde, right? Like Jekyll's like, nope, I need you
Yeah.
to let me exist. Right? Or
Yeah.
what the evil one, whatever, is like, you can't kill yourself because then I stop
I know
existing,
what you mean,
right?
though.
So then we have
Yeah.
I love the actual play because like the original, like the soundtrack is really awesome, but I like the play, like if you ever have a chance to see the play, go see the play because you have like these conversations that happen in the middle of the song, right? So we have like Natalie and Henry, right? So the Natalie's like, sorry, not Natalie and Henry, Natalie and Dan, Natalie and her dad, and is like 4 times a week, and like that's a lot. And her dad's like, well, it's what the doctor recommended, and so Natalie is just like, this is never gonna get better, right? And so Gabe keeps singing. Um, Gabe shows up and starts listening to him, and Natalie's like, he's just never gonna go away, and Dan's like, I don't know. And so Natalie with her sass is like, this is one of those moments you could be a typical parent and just say yes. So Dan's like, yes. And Natalie goes, thanks. That's comforting. Like super sarcastic, like pinned him into the corner, right? Um, and so then
Yeah.
Gabe starts singing to them, right? Like, I am flame and I am fire. I am destruction, decay, and desire. I'll hurt you. And so it's just like, and it's kind of how he is with these two individuals, right? He's hurting their lives by existing in Diana's mind, right? Ha, I love it. This is such a good song.
And not existing in
Yeah.
theirs. Yeah.
And so Dan goes, Natalie, it's not all about your comfort. Like sometimes it's about helping your mother. And Gabe is singing, like, I am your wish, your dream come true, but I am your darkest nightmare too. And I feel like that line is like specifically thrown at Dan, right? Like, I'm your, you had a child. I was your
Mhm.
wish. I was your dream come true, but now I'm your darkest nightmare, right? Um, and
Yeah.
so Natalie's just like, screw you, dad. Like, it's never about me, kind of. And so Gabe keeps singing, and though you made me, you can't change me. I'm the perfect stranger who knows you too well. And it's like, this is getting really like, I don't know. This song gave me such creepy vibes, but it's so good. Um, and so then there's like this one line.
Well, I wonder.
Go ahead. You go.
Go ahead. Well, so I wonder if it's also speaking to Natalie's fear of ending up like her mom.
Which is a fear that hasn't shown up yet, but it does. You're very good at this.
I'm just thinking from like the
Yeah.
child in this situation,
Yeah.
like me.
Oh, there's a oh, you're gonna love this one song in the second act. So, Gabe is like, there's one line in his song that doesn't really fit with the others, and it's, I'll tell you the truth if you let me try. And that one just kind of hits weird, right? Because it's like, I feed on the fear behind your eyes. Like, I'm
Oh,
destruction, decay, desire. You can't get rid of me. You made me, but you can't change me. I am a stranger, but I know you really well. So, like, I
right.
have all this power. And then he's like, I'll tell you the truth if you let me try. And so it's kind of like realizing that, yeah, he is still just a memory. He isn't actually real.
Hmm.
Anyway, um,
Right.
so what ends up happening, there's Gabe singing I'm Alive over and over again in the song. And what he does is he finds Natalie in the bathroom, and she starts opening like the medicine cabinet and starts taking her mom's pills. She takes Valium and Xanax, and she just shrugs and goes like, "What the hell?" and just handful of them, right? And so this is interesting because it's the same type of attitude she had when she tried pot for the first time, but this time she's alone, and this time it's not something that she's doing with someone. This time it's just she just the first time she took it is because maybe it was a little nice to relax, but this time it feels more like an avoidance technique of like my dad literally just told me that,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not about you, it's about your mom. And so Natalie's like, fine, I'll just stop existing, right? Like I'm gonna numb out. And this is a third way of dissociating. So now we have all three members of this family completely dissociating in three completely different ways, but it doesn't, I don't know, like, it's beautiful.
But
Yeah,
none of it's
and so, like,
healthy.
it's all
Yeah.
dissociation, but it's in 3 different, like, there's no one way to be mentally ill, like, there's so many different ways you can.
Exactly.
Anyway, so Gabe, keeps singing, and he kinda shows back up, so we're full circle back to the appointment where Diana is, and he goes, "I'm alive, I'm right behind you. You say forget, but I will remind you. You can try to hide, but you know that I will find you. And then this is a line that you hit on earlier. Because if you won't grieve me, you won't leave me behind. And it's this Diana hasn't grieved him, and she refuses to. Because what happens when you
Yeah.
grieve someone? And I know that you and I have touched on grieving people who are still alive. In order to grieve, in order to complete that cycle of grief, you have to hit acceptance. You have to accept that this person is not in your life anymore, whether alive or dead. There has to be this
That
acceptance of it.
not only that this person existed and that this person was a part of you and impacted you in some way, shape, or form, but that this person is no longer going to be able to. You have to grieve all of that. And you have to grieve the fact that you allowed yourself to open up and then learn to open up again. And that's a part of grief that is so tough for so many people, that opening yourself up again
Well, and it's
afterwards.
interesting.
And I think that's what everybody in this family is
I think
struggling with.
it's not everyone, but I love that you brought that up because oh, Winston, don't sniff the microphone. Come up here. Winston.
He's all like, that looks fun. Can I
Lay
lick it?
down. Not on my boobs. You can
The conversations we have with our children,
seriously
right?
leave my boobs alone. Um
I've said that in grocery stores, and I got to tell you, every man in the
have you
grocery
ever
store turns and looks.
have you ever
So
opened your
don't
window
do
and
that in public.
said, "Give my nipples a purpose"? It's from New Girl.
No. Oh, I have to watch that episode then.
I don't know.
Wait, have I?
Moving on. I don't want to spoil anything, so. Um no, you haven't. Sorry.
Okay.
You were saying something. Oh, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that grieving includes that acceptance of being willing to open up again, because I feel like Dan has accepted that his son died, but he never went through the first four. Like he didn't grieve him or anything. He just was like, "Oh, my son died, accepted, moved on," without ever having the emotional process of it. And
Yeah.
so now he can't move on from it because he didn't do the first part of grieving. And Diana can't move on because she hasn't done the acceptance part of grieving, right? And, Natalie can't move
Yeah.
on because she is, I feel like, stuck in that anger that her brother existed, right? It's not necessarily like she's angry at him for existing because of how it impacts her life. And so, you have everyone stuck in these different stages of grief, none of them actually moving forward, and all of them dissociating in unhealthy ways. And not a one of them is right or
Yeah.
wrong. Not a one of them is the good guy or the bad guy. They're all just complex individual humans in a very messed up situation.
Exactly. And it's so tough in that situation because you want to make someone the villain. You want to blame Gabe for existing and for sticking around and playing that tricky little game that he's playing with mom. But at the same time, you want to blame mom for having this illness, but you can't do that. And you can't blame dad for not helping mom figure this out and not realizing that dad needs just as much help. And yeah,
It's
it's a very tough situation.
so the song ends and Dr. Madden is like, let's say he's 18 now. Isn't that when kids move out? Isn't that like when like shouldn't you start letting him go? Um
Yeah.
and Diana doesn't respond. And so Dr. Madden's like, it's been 4 weeks now, and I'd like to try something new. Sometimes these stories are hard. Hypnosis can be helpful. And so, you have this doctor who's tried this one type of therapy and is like, you know what, let's try a different type of therapy. I genuinely feel like Dr. Madden is doing and doing their best and doing everything they can in this situation. And so, Diana is like, "Oh, I don't think I could be hypnotized. I mean, like, you can try, but, like, it's just not gonna work on me, right?" And he's like, "Okay." So what he ends up doing,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily called hypnotizing nowadays. It's more like a grounding exercise is what I've had it referred to, but he's basically just like, put your feet on the floor, put your hands in your lap, take a breath and breathe, right? And so then if you're following along with the actual soundtrack, we're onto the song called Make Up Your Mind slash Catch Me I'm Falling, right? So you have Dr. Madden, he's like, walk with me, like let's visualize that we're going down a hall, like we're going down a long flight of stairs, and then there's a hall, and then there's this door, right? And so then he asks her, like, okay, can you still hear me? She's like, yes. He's like, are you scared? And she's like, no, I'm not. And so this is an interesting thing as well, because, like mentioned in the Just Janilee episode with EMDR, the most important thing is feeling safe, is not being scared, right? Healing is never going to happen in the same environments that cause the pain. Healing is never going to happen if you're scared or if you're nervous or if you're upset. Like we did this grounding exercise. You walk down a hall, you opened a door, and now we're going to be in a room, and I'm going to, give you ways to maybe view the situation. But if you're scared, none of it's going to work. So, good doctor.
Right.
And so he sings, he's like, make up your mind to explore yourself, right? Make up your mind that you have stories to tell. We'll search in your past for what sorrows can last, but then you have to make up your mind to be well. And so he's like, we'll deal with the stuff that's in the past, but you have to have something worth living for, is essentially how I take that, right? Like you have to
Yeah.
make up your mind is kind of his phrase, where he's just like, you get to decide. You're gonna explore yourself. You have stories to tell that aren't about your son, right? And so then, time is passing during the song as well, and Dan's like, Diana, you come home from these, like, visits, and you're in tears. Are they actually like helping? But then, we're back into the session, and all of a sudden Diana's being more open, and she's talking about things that she never talked about with that first doctor, with that Dr. Fine, right? She's like, we were both undergrads, we were into architecture. This is where we learned, like, the baby wasn't planned, so Gabe wasn't planned, right? But neither was the marriage. I'd always expected to be too busy to have a baby. But then the baby came and it all made sense until, and then she stops talking, right? So it's that building up that narrative and that story behind the painful event. And now we're at that painful moment, right? And the doctor's, prompting until,
Yeah.
and we hear the song that happened out, he's not here, when the dad's like, when she brought out the birthday cake, so it's like, he's not here. And so we hear that melody again, and so Diana kind of is starting to shrivel and get scared again. And so Dr. Madden, he reminds her, like, you get to make up your mind that you're strong enough. You get to decide, right? Let the truth be revealed. Admit what you've lost, live with the cost. And at times it does hurt to be healed. So he's like, you're strong enough. You can keep going, right? And all of this, and
Yeah.
it's really beautiful lyrics to the song. So then Gabe shows up, right? And Gabe starts singing Catch Me I'm Falling in between Dr. Madden talking. And Dr. Madden's like, in our first session, Catch Me I'm Falling. You told me through your history faster, have Gabe singing. And he's basically like, you told me that you feel
Yeah.
like you're talking about someone else, right? And so then Gabe is like still singing, and Diana starts to sing with Gabe, right? It's that pull, it's that comfort of the devil that right? The hell She's like, I recognize this. I know how to cope by singing and following along with Gabe, right? And so Dr. Madden is like,
Yeah.
make it about you, right? Stop making it about your son. Um, Catch me, I'm falling for good and everything. So then we switch to, and this is, I said it happened earlier, so I apologize, spoilers. But you have Natalie is at her piano concert, right? Henry's backstage, he's wishing her good luck, and she's like, "Did you see my parents out there?" And um, Henry's like, "I didn't, but I'm sure they'll be here." And Natalie's like, "Oh yeah, are you sure?" And I mean, like, can you blame her? Right? Like, no.
No.
And
Yeah.
I just feel like, throughout at any point in this entire play, you can just say, "Can you blame them?" And the answer is always no, because you get it. This play does such a good job
Yeah.
of putting you in these situations and understanding things. Um, and so it's fun that we have Natalie at her concert, right? Because then Diana in therapy starts talking about Natalie. And so she's like, "We had Natalie, and I know that Natalie knows, but I couldn't hold her in the hospital because it was just too hard." And so then you have Natalie like, "Well, where the hell are they?" And then Diana's talking about Natalie. "I couldn't let myself hold her." And so you have like this, it's almost like seeing the growth in Diana of, "I couldn't hold my daughter when she was born." And Dr. Madden even brings up, "That's the first time in 2 weeks of therapy that you've mentioned Natalie's name." And realizing that Diana does care about Natalie, and she's slowly moving through things, but not fast enough because
Mhm.
Natalie is 16. Natalie has this event and her parents don't show up. And so it's like, again, this contrast
Yeah.
of, I'm starting to be able to accept that I need to be there for Natalie. Like I'm bringing her up in therapy. It's not all about Gabe, but it's not fast enough. It's not, like you missed it, like
I'm
yeah,
losing
Dr.
Natalie,
Fine,
yeah.
all of the other doctors, there
Yeah.
was no progress. But you're finally making progress, but it's not fast enough and you're missing these opportunities, and it's this heart-wrenching, right? So, because her
Yeah.
parents don't show up, Natalie ends up totally messing up. And so you have that happens during the end of the song where you have Dr. Madden again, he's like, make up your mind that you want clarity, take what you know. Excuse me. He's like, take what you know, make it make sense, face your fear, everything over time, like it gets more clear. These visions are just your defense. So this seeing Gabe as an adult, it's just your body defending you, right? And so this is the first time that, some of Gabe's lines throughout his songs have been popping up in they don't really fit with like this I'm trying to like control you kind of evil way. And this is kind of the first time that we realize necessarily why, because Gabe is not he's not trying to hurt. He's trying to help. But he also isn't an individual
Yeah.
person. He is just a part of Diana's mind, right? And so you have Dr. Madden, he's like, the visions
Yeah.
are just your defense. So stop. And it's almost like a line to us audience members. Stop trying to make this guy the villain. There doesn't have to be a villain to have a good story, right? Because this is an amazing story and there's no villain.
Yeah.
And so, make up your mind, make up your mind. You have the power. Natalie messes up on her song, and she ends up saying, what's wrong with classical music? It's too rigid." And she does like this jazz stuff, which is not what she was supposed to do. And so it doesn't end very well. And so then you have like um, all of the family. And I think that this is really so you have all of them singing at the same time. But then they all come together, and this is Diana, Dan, Gabe, and Natalie. So just the main four. And it's like, "Catch me, I'm falling." Um, and it's so interesting because they are all falling in their own ways, right? Right? Diana's
Yeah.
falling in,
It's the fall of this
yeah,
whole
like you have
family. Yeah.
Dan who's just like, she's coming home, she's crying. Dan's not seeing this as like a good thing. Everything, like it's just so intense. Natalie's falling at her recital. Diana's, experiencing this pain that she's been ignoring for so long, right? And so, flying headfirst into fate. "Catch me, I'm falling." Dr. Madden has this really great line. He's like, "The more that you hold on to something that you've lost, the more you fear losing it." And
Yeah.
so they're all like, "Catch me before, it's too late." And so Dr. Madden's, like, "Wouldn't you like to be free from all of that finally? Like, don't you want to, like, you can go home, you can clear out his room, spend some time with your daughter, maybe let Gabe go finally, right?" So the song ends, right? And then they're home, and Dan's like, "This is a good step, Diana, right?" And so you have Diana, and she is going through Gabe's stuff. She has like a blanket, and then pictures and everything, and she finally finds a music box. Okay. Now, this music box, we don't know anything about it yet, but she starts singing along with it. And Gabe, so she's like, the song is like, I saw you light the ballroom, with your sparkling eyes of blue, graceful as an angel's wing. I dreamed to dance with you. And so, you know, Gabe walks in. He's in this tuxedo. He looks amazing. You whispered slyly and softly. You told me that you would be true. We spun around 1,000 stars, and I dreamed a dance with you. And they start dancing, and it's just like it's not as antagonistic. It's more calm. Like this song is slower, and you have more of this connection between the two. And so, Gabe kisses her hand and steps away. And Diana, she starts to realize what it means to let go of Gabe. I'll wake alone tomorrow. The dream of our dance is through. I don't get to dream of this dance anymore. But now until forever, I will live to dance with you. Um, and so Gabe's turning to go, but on like the last line of the song, he turns back and she just stops singing. She's kind of quiet. And so then Gabe starts singing. And this is one of my favorite songs. It's like a minute long, but there's a world. And so Gabe is singing, there's a world that I know, a place we can go where the pain will go away. There's a world where the sun shines each day. There's a world. There's a world out there. I'll show you just where, and in time I know you'll see. There's a world where we can be free. Come with me.
And she's thinking
Yeah.
of ending it.
And then all of a sudden, so Gabe keeps singing Come With Me, and Dr. Madden starts saying words. He walks in with a hospital chart and he goes, Goodman Diana, discovered unconscious at home. And Gabe's still singing, There's a world where we can be free. And Dr. Madden is like, multiple razor wounds to wrists and forearms, self inflicted. And Gabe, come with me. Dr. Madden, saline, structures and gauze, IV, antibiotics, isolated, sedated, and restrained. Damn it. Gabe holds out his hand, right? And then Diana takes it and follows him off stage. And so you have like this, she. It's just, I don't know, like you just sit with that for a second and you're like, I get it. And it's so hard because it came after such growth. But sometimes the growth is just too much too fast. And it
So
is
painful.
it is painful. And if we think about Diana, the only comfort that she has in her life is her son. It's this image of him that she's raised in her mind. She has a daughter who's dissociating. She has a husband who's dissociating. She doesn't have anyone else. And she has a tiny memory of something that she's lost. And she's ready to go.
So my dad's only whole brother committed suicide the year I was born. And my grandmother, my dad's mother, spent the next 8 years smoking and drinking herself to death because she could not get past that death of that little boy. Well, it wasn't a little boy. I mean, he was a grown man.
But
and she abandoned the grandkids, her husband, her son. And I mean, so I can take that and go, oh my gosh, I see why my grandmother did this from
and
the start.
already.
Whereas before I was like,
Well, and I love it too because it takes you inside the journey and it helps people who maybe never have suffered being suicidal before. And if you've listened, you know that Larissa and I both have. But it gives you like a glimpse into that world and that situation that maybe you've never been in before. You've never understood why someone would even go that far. And all of a sudden you can see
why someone would
and all of a sudden you can realize, and I love this song, like it's beautiful and it's calm. I was listening to it like on repeat a couple weeks ago just because it's beautiful. I'm not suicidal, it's fine. But that's the nice thing about this art is it applies in all these situations. And even when you're really depressed, like, there's a world where the pain will go away. There's a world where all of this stops, right? A common quote with suicide is, "You don't want to end your life, you just want something in your life to stop." Maybe
You just want the
maybe you
pain
just want
to
a world where
stop.
the sun
Yeah.
shines every day, a world where you can be free from everything, from the weights and the burdens of the world.
Yeah. No more sorrows, no more pain, just
Yeah.
sunshine, no more rain.
Um, so we switch to, so that's like Diana's perspective. And then we switch to Dan and the doctor having a conversation. And Dr. Madden goes, ECT is indicated. And Dan's like, they still do that? For those who don't know, ECT
Yeah.
is like electroshock therapy, right? And so Dr. Madden's like, yeah, we do in cases like this. Like, she's got a long history of drug therapy and resistance to that. It hasn't worked, right? She's acutely suicidal. Like, we just had to bring her into a hospital to save her life. It's really our best option. And I love that Dr. Madden didn't just jump to this, right? He tried like hypnosis, he tried all of these different methods of helping her, and then
Yeah.
this is kind of the only option that we have left, right? And Dan's like, that's terrifying. And Dr. Madden, being a calm doctor, is like, the electricity involved is barely enough to light a 100-watt bulb. And Dan's like, oh, well, if it's only a 100-watt bulb, like, now we know where Natalie gets her sass. Um, and Dr. Madden's like,
Right.
it's safer than crossing the street. And the short-term success is over 80%. And Dan's just like, this is, I feel like, a very interesting moment where Dan's reality is just like it, he can't pretend anymore. He accepted his son's death and thought everything was fine. And now he's looking at his wife who attempted suicide. Like, this is where your reality comes crashing into you and your disassociation fails. Right. And he goes, I thought that,
Yeah. Because
yeah, I thought
eventually
she
it
was
does.
getting
Yeah.
better. Dr. Madden's like, some patients recover just enough strength to follow through on suicidal impulses, but not enough strength to resist them, which is exactly what we were just talking about. And it's super true. And that's where having a community and people who care about you really helps. And Dan goes, well, that seems
Yeah.
very fucked. And Dr. Madden's like, yeah, but legally we need to have her
That
consent for
is.
this ECT as well. And Dan's like, I don't really think she's going to go for this. He's having this argument with the doctor, and doctor's like, look, we can administer the ECT. You can bring her home in 10 days, or we can keep her sedated for 48 hours, discharge her, and wait for her to try again. Like, these are your two options, everything you've been
Yeah.
doing up to this point or something new. And so, go home, take the night, think about it. And so then there's this song of Dan. It's called I've Been. And so he's just like, I've tried to help her and I don't know how. I like this line. He goes, all the times that I've been told the way her illness goes, but the truth of it is no one really knows. And it's
Yeah.
true, like, everyone is so different and all of these
Mm-hmm.
things that I've tried, like, they don't work. And so, every day this act that we do, it just gets more and more crazy. It gets more and more absurd. And all of my fears just sit inside me screaming to be heard. And I know they won't, though, not a single word. And so we're starting to realize that Dan is aware that he has some stuff he's repressing, right? And his reality came crashing down. He's starting to be like, okay, well, all right, I guess I got to figure this out now, right? It's this beautiful kind of like, does he let himself feel those emotions? He's like, but I know they won't. Why? Because his responsibility to his wife is going to be what he uses as an excuse to keep all of that repressed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Dan starts to clean up after Diana at the house, and Gabe's watching him, which I think is an interesting thing. And he goes, Dan is singing, like, I was here, I was at her side, like, when she called, when she cried, kind of like the song earlier, like, I've always been here. I have always been here. And so, how could she like be not selfish, but like how could she leave me alone? Like she was willing to leave me here alone, you know? And so then he's like,
Yeah.
"Okay, well, will this
Yeah.
work? Well, there's a cure. Well, like, is it a cure?" He's like, "There's no way to be sure, but I'm weary to the bone. And whenever she goes flying, I keep my feet on the ground. And now I need a little lift and there's no one around." Again, this whole who is he supposed to turn to? His wife in the hospital bed? His daughter who's
Mhm.
completely dissociated? I mean, so then Gabe starts singing with Dan, and every time Gabe sings with anyone else, I always love the words because they have a double meaning, right? This can be something Gabe is saying, and it can also be something Dan is saying. And it's I've never had to face the world without her at my side. N- um, Sorry, that's a line. So Gabe and Dan sing together, but it's not like words; it's just humming. Then this is just Dan singing again, just to be clear. I've never had to face the world without her. I'm strolling, like sorry, this line is just hard. Now I'm strolling right beside her, and the black hole opens wide. Mine is just a slower suicide. Yeah.
And it's the
It's kind of
truth.
like you said with your grandma, like
Yeah.
it's just going to take 8 years, but it's just a slower suicide, right? And so it's this idea of, and I love you have like Diana, and she's the crazy one, the one that's going to the doctor, one that's taking the meds, and the one that on the surface looks absolutely bonkers. But he's kind of realizing I'm going through the same thing as mine's just slower and more socially acceptable.
Yeah. Mine's accepted. Hers isn't. But at the same time, man, is this falling apart.
And
And
in tandem.
yeah, you just don't see anybody
Yeah.
actually being healthy. Yeah.
And so he's like, I've been here for every high, every low, and this is the worst situation that we've ever known. And so he kind of makes up. So Natalie walks in and she's like, "Dad, why didn't you take me with you, like to take mom to the hospital, right?" And Dan's like, "We don't see a lot of you these days. Is Henry a good influence?" And Natalie's like, "Compared to what?" Kind of like, "You don't influence me." And so Dan's like, "Okay." But I also think it's interesting he didn't answer the question. Why didn't you take me with you? Well, you're not around, so it's like
Because he can't.
maybe because if you all got together and faced the grief together, but no, they're all three of them are so insistent that they're going to face all of this alone, right? So
Yeah.
then Dr. Madden is like the after effects are minimal, you'll feel a little bit like you have a hangover. And Gabe is like, "Mom, don't let them do this. It causes brain damage." And so then you have like Dan, who is finally telling Natalie what's going on. Sorry. They is like, your mom's in for new treatment, ECT, and Natalie goes, "Okay, LMNOP. Like, what is that? I don't know." And he's like, "It's electroconvulsive therapy,
Yeah.
shock therapy." And Natalie's like, "You are kidding me, right? Like, that's bullshit. Like, no, So we have Natalie who's completely against it. We have Gabe who's completely against it. You have Dr. Madden saying a minority of patients report some memory loss, but it's usually not much memory. And Gabe is like, "Well, how do you know how much memory you've lost if you've lost it?" Like, good question, right? And so basically, Natalie's like, "No, this is bullshit." And her dad's just like, "Language." And she's like, "No, dad, she trusts you." And she does, right? And so then we have this song called "Didn't I See This Movie?" And what I find interesting with all of this is what was Dan's original reaction with his treatment? No. Like, that's crazy. And then he had some thinking and he changed his mind. And it's almost like
Yeah.
he's just sure that Natalie's going to change her mind and come around on it, right? And so you have this song where Diana is told
Right.
about the ECT and she goes, "Well, didn't I see this movie?" And it's like, the hospital was heavy, but the cuckoo's nest is worse. Isn't this the one where in the end the good guys fry? Like I saw this movie and I walked out. I'm not a sociopath. Like I'm not going to So stay out of my brain, right? What makes you think I'd lose my mind for you? And so it's like it's a whole song that's basically what everyone's been thinking of. Hell no, stay out of my brain. Like, no. And so this song
Yeah.
ends with her just being like, I'm walking out. And then there's just a moment, and Dan comes in and he starts, kind of calming her down and saying it's a song called A Light in the Dark. And it basically, he walks her through the same kind of thing that he thought through. One light, basically he has like this image of a house and there's one light, but why do I live there alone? Oh, because you're not there. And he kind of makes it where you're not there mentally, but you're also not there physically because you just tried to kill yourself. And so he's like, take
Yeah.
this chance
Yeah.
because it may be our last to be free, to let go of the past, and to try to be husband and wife, to let love never die, or to just live our life. And, they have a couple lines where they like sing together, but eventually she signs the form and says that she'll do like,
Because it is that light in the dark. It is
yeah,
that last hope.
it is. It's an absolutely last hope
Yeah.
where it's take this chance and we'll make a new start somewhere far from what keeps us apart. And I swear somewhere in the night there's a light in the dark. It's this is the last chance that we have, right? Um
Yeah.
and it's interesting because in this scene, as she's signing the papers, Gabe is there and he's watching, but for almost the first time in the entire show, Diana doesn't acknowledge that he's there. She's staring at her husband. She's staring at Dan. She's staring at this hope of a future, that everything that Dr. Madden was saying, right? Like, have a life that you want to live. Don't like make it all about your son, make it about you, right? It's just like this beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful moment. I love it so much.
It sounds amazing. Like, yeah, I'm like on the edge of my seat as close to the camera as I can be without you seeing zits. And
That is the
yeah.
end of Act 1.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, maybe we need to
Yeah,
do this in
most
two parts.
definitely. So, um, come back and listen because we're gonna be doing
Yeah,
this again.
please.
It's such a good. If you haven't, like, if you just want to like listen to the music, it's so good. It's so good. It just makes me so happy. But,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's all I gotta say. Come back and listen. It'll be great.
Yep. Stay tuned for part 2.